Right, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all
We,
our last day here. We have an hour this morning and another hour this afternoon. And Lisa, why don't you get started?
all right. Well, um, I am really happy to see everyone and so thrilled that Colorado Coaching Consortium decided to pull this event together in this way to give people an opportunity to try some things that fit within their day. And so this, this conversation, my piece today is the hard truth, honest conversations facing the barriers to meaningful conversations. And my name is Lisa Sauter. I work with the Early Childhood Council that's in Weld County. So it's Weld County's Early Childhood Council. It is embedded within the United Way here. But I've been in the field for a long time. Have been a coach, have supervised coaches, and have contract coaches, things like that. So I went through UC Denver's coaching courses, all three of them, and have tried to take in as much as I can around this topic along the way, and have had some other things early childhood wise that I think influenced me that might be helpful. So Janet, go ahead and share our slide. All right. So I, I think I thought of this as I was sort of given a topic and then trying to figure this out. How could I depict that? Because I love photographs and images that help us set on the topic. So a a river that's moving fairly fast, that doesn't have great banks on it, that is difficult to cross is what came to my mind in terms of having these hard conversations. So let's go ahead to the next page there, Janet. Um, just wanted to make sure, I think probably everyone has attended some other session for training this week, but this is a little bit about the consortium. I was able to be involved early on in a few of the meetings that other people were invited to who were coaches, uh, beyond the group that was really trying to spearhead what can we do better about coaching in Colorado, and have since become a member of the group. So you see our mission is to provide opportunities and promote connections, be advocates on your behalf. And the vision is for our early childhood coaches to reach their potential and achieve the most responsive impact. So thanks, Janet. Anybody not familiar with the conference norms? Any questions on those? All right. I would be pleased if people want to put your names and where you're from in Colorado, or if anyone happens to be outside of Colorado, where you're from, in the chat. But my question that I'm going to pose to you right now is, and I'd like you to go ahead and feel free to speak up or to put this in the chat. What brings you to this session with this particular topic? Anybody? I'm going to give you a little wait time. Is it because it was a way to not have to deal with some other paperwork in your office? It was a way to spend an hour or maybe enjoy a cup of coffee, some other refreshing morning drink, or just because it was offered?
Lisa, there's a bunch of things in chat.
I see a bunch of names and things like that. I'm not seeing any response just yet, and somebody else is catching that about the why that they're coming to the session. Happy to hear.
Lisa, I'll share a little bit. I'm always curious to hear what other coaches are experiencing as far as these barriers. I mean, we always think of funding and time as two big ones, but I'm curious to hear if there's others barriers to those relationships.
All right.
So thanks for offering this time.
Sure. Let's see. Someone here is saying they met me at a previous conference and loved the history and with mixed stages, looking for new strategies, and wanted to hear some of the challenges that other people experience. Sure, I think us sharing today some of that might be helpful. Leah Clausen, yes. How many of us were taught as a child to avoid difficult conversations or learned that somehow or another along the way?
I'm going to chime in, Lisa, because Pam
Sure.
K says sometimes it's easier to avoid hard truths than to address them. I love that's real. Thanks, Pam.
Very good.
And I think too that challenges bring people together, especially if you're in the same field that you share the same passion. So hearing people have challenges just as you and finding solution together makes it more wild and more valuable and more connected. And I think that's what I found whenever I'm invited to connect with fellow coaches or trainers or whomever that's in the field.
Sure, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that part too. All right, next slide there, Janet. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing with me, what are some of the things you're running into that makes those conversations hard? You know, it's kind of, I'm dragging it out of you.
I could share a little bit.
Sure, Phoebe.
Good morning, I'm Phoebe. One thing I find is like a lack of if there's a lack of expectations or norms around how those conversations will go, um, then it's harder. Then like we don't both agree that we will have hard conversations, and therefore it's harder to jump into those, or it's easier to like tiptoe around rather than have this like, a positive association, but like this confrontation, which I've learned from Reggio educators in Italy is like they think of the idea of confrontation very positively and like productively. So I think I'm on like my pathway towards coaching, but I've experienced in my early childhood workplace not having those norms can be a hurdle.
All right. Anyone else have something about what makes conversations hard? Partly our learning to avoid them. My camera's not on.
No,
I think it's
Was it on earlier?
it was. There you go. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
I was going to share that I think what makes a conversation hard is the unknown of my reaction, how I would walk through that conversation. And also it's just going through that hard process of starting it and how it would finish. But it's not on the person itself, their reaction, it is on mine.
Let's see. Great.
I see a lot of responses in there, potential conflict, the should do's and the want to's, the cultural differences, the staffing overturn and having enough time with coaches, equity, frame of reference, anxiety about other person's reaction, having time to build the relationship, to establish trust. I'm finding myself engaging with younger caregivers that seem to struggle with in-person and one-on-one connections. Having the conversation with someone who is resistant or avoidant, resistance, all of these. Yeah, the emotionalness of some of those hard conversations.
Yeah, and I see someone also brought up the cultural differences piece as well. So, Steph, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that sometimes I find conversations difficult when you're still establishing a habit of reflection. If your coaching partner isn't a natural reflector, it takes time to build that skill, and those conversations can be really challenging for me when, I'm like, tell me, I ask a reflective question, like, well, tell me about something that went well, and they just really struggle to answer it.
Okay.
And so I find those conversations challenging sometimes.
Very good. All right. How about our next slide there? So, well, this is just gonna bring us into some of these pieces that you've already brought up and maybe bring up some other things. So, sometimes we've got these communication breakdowns. Somehow or another, either someone doesn't get a piece of information that someone else expected them to have. Sometimes it is just our communication might not be understood in the way that it was intended to be given. Our expectations can certainly be misaligned. They may be unrealistic expectations on either side of this hard conversation. Trust issues is generally brought up pretty commonly. What about related or unrelated but unresolved conflicts that either person has that might be coming into this conversation? So this interaction that I'm going to have with you feels very much like a reaction or an interaction I had with another person somewhere at some time in my life, and it really didn't go well. I didn't get to a resolution with it, and yet it's somehow or another coming up within me, and I'm bringing it to this interaction, or for the other person, that's what's happening with them. An individual's feelings of insecurity or low self-esteem can certainly be another contributor to what is going on that makes conversations hard. You take us to our next slide. So I just wanted to bring us back to some coaching terms that are commonly used around challenges. It brings us back to that matching, or commonly using the term mismatching, between a coach and someone that they are working with. And, was there really even an option sometimes about whether or not this person was the right person to coach someone else or be coached? What kind of support does either the coach have? What kind of support does the individual that you are working with have outside of when you're with them? Is there anything that they are missing there that is contributing to this difficulty with this conversation? Our perceptions, our communication, and our communication styles. Who's accountable here? Are you the accountable person? Is the person that you are working with the person that's accountable? Is it the director of a program? Is it your boss? Who has the accountability? Where's the clarity of what the expectations are? And time management issues. Is there enough time? Is it difficult to get time with someone? And how is that time happening? Virtually, in person, all of these things. Role boundaries, I think, is one that is discussed a lot, and making sure that we are not crossing those boundaries, and then creating trust. All right, Janet. Oh, Enola, I want to come back to you, but you had your hand up.
No, I got to put mine in the chat. Thank you.
All right, all right. When you're going to enter into a conversation that you know is going to be hard up front, that's when we're doing a lot of thinking about it. Are we pre-planning around it? But are we thinking about where we are at emotionally when we need to have that conversation? So, you know, have we done some deep breathing? Have we done some things that help us calm down so that when we need to enter into that hard conversation, we have the ability to enter into it and speak with our heart and listen with our heart so that we can have the conversation. Past experiences, again, how is that influencing what's going on here? And are those things that we need to ask in the midst of the hard conversation so that we can understand each other and come to a place where we can have our conversation and be able to come to a place that we can both feel good about. Concerns someone brought up earlier, concerns about that potential for this to have a bad outcome. And certainly we have seen, witnessed, perhaps been part of a hard conversation that came out bad. I will say that the research is telling us that if you are willing to go back and try that again and work on it some more, those individuals actually end up with stronger relationships in the end than they had before the hard conversation ever had to happen. And, you know, I think we're all probably anxious about uncertainty. So when we go into these conversations and we're not sure, that's where we find it harder to have the conversation. All right. Next slide. So this is related to Myers-Briggs. It is the Thomas Killen scale. And the agency that I work for, as an agency, they actually asked our entire agency to do this within the last 6 months. And it was very, very interesting to find out where everyone within our entire agency of about 50 people fit. So having some sense of what your style of conflict is and potentially what the other person's style might be might not necessarily require doing this whole assessment if you have a little bit of information about some of this and don't have that ability. So there's the competing, which is when I want to put forth my outcome as the outcome of this conflict. I could collaborate and we could come together and we can figure it out. We could do some compromising. We can do avoiding and we can do accommodating, and whatever the other person wants, I'm going to let them have that. And so the scale is kind of set up. Compete and collaborate are the higher on assertion and people who are assertive, and then going from the left to the right there talks about our level of ability to cooperate. So any guess on well, I guess I'll just tell because it would be hard for you to guess, but I work for a not-for-profit. It's fairly large. We do lots of things, but interestingly, of the 50 or so people, probably, I think the number was about 35 of them fell into the bottom category. They were avoiders or accommodators. So I'm curious, as you think about this going forward, how you would see these individuals that you are working with alongside of, what is their style? Are they one of the, can you easily identify them as one of these four, and then know what your default is, to know then how is it that you work together. So I have, I think, a little bit of a handout that can be shared with you that will talk a little bit more in depth about these pieces, and encourage you to take some assessments similar to this one or something else that will help you understand more about yourself. All right. Any questions on that one? Anybody feel like you are dealing more with with someone very, very different than you?
Lisa, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm thinking, like, if your style is the compete, where you want your
Your way.
Yeah, your way, and you're working with an accommodator or avoider, it could be easy for you to get your way, but really, is that of service to the other person or people, right?
And or to your outcome, right?
Right.
Because if your goal is to support the experiences of young children, and doing that through the adults who are working with them, then how does doing that serve that purpose? So yeah, it's a lot of work to try to understand, and it is helpful when both people kind of have a conversation and know which their defaults are. You know, we have noticed within our agency a lot of individuals who were avoiders are a lot more likely to speak up now, because part of it was creating a safe enough space for them to know that it's okay. That if I'm a strong, assertive person, and I really like my way, and my eyes are open so that I can see that this could be a challenge for someone else that I am interacting with, then I can open myself up to some other experience, some other knowledge from a different perspective that could make it better for both of us. Tina?
I just am looking at this, and then I look to see it says styles of conflict. And then I'm thinking about a specific couple of teachers that I work with. And every time I know they are very highly focused on academics with toddlers, 12 to 3-year-olds, 12 months to 3-year-olds. They're highly focused, and I know where it's coming from. You know, I know that they're in a school district, and I know where it's coming from. And it just seems like I always leave that place compromising and accommodating because the power there, I feel like the power is so strong because of the school district, and they are just one toddler room with 8 babies. And it's so strong there that I see more of the conflict with, like, the administration. And then as it trickles down into the preschool and the kinder and the preschool, and then the toddler room. And I just I feel exhausted, really, when I leave there, because I think I'm mostly exhausted because I try hard to help them think about things for early childhood and what's appropriate for toddlers. And I leave accommodating again or compromising. And I'm just thinking, wow, this is like a big thing. You know, they don't really even they're not really in the mindset of allowing teachers to think for themselves, really. It's here's your curriculum, here's your, structure, here's this, and you just do this. And yeah, it's pretty intense. But I've never seen this, and I appreciate this to really reflect about myself on this one. So yeah, thanks for bringing this up.
Does anybody else have some similar situations where you're dealing with something that is related to this power issue and or maybe an institutional structure that individuals are working within that is fairly rigid, perhaps dictated to them? Not so much. Are you in much more community type programs that have a little bit more flexibility and ability of the staff there to be with children a little bit differently than that, I hope. At any rate, I think let's think about this, Tina, to see if there's some thoughts and ideas of ways to begin sort of nibbling at that, because I don't know that something that powerful is going to be taken down or molded into something different very easily, especially if the person is bought into what they're asked to do, and maybe because in some respects maybe that's an easy thing, you know.
I'm just seeing that as more of a systemic challenge, right? That you're really looking at the administration of the school and how do you connect into the more the principal, helping that person to understand what's appropriate for toddlers. And the more, for example, like the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard, giving them some information as to what's developmentally appropriate for those children, even looking at a basic developmental chart, so to speak, that says, here's what toddlers can do, or possibly, right? And the more movement, this is why I love the Center for the Developing Child, they say the more movement, certainly the more brain development. So those children are going to be smarter later on, so deal with them as to, we want great outcomes for children, right? Well, then more movement, right? Not more sitting and those kinds of things. But these systemic challenges, I think so many coaches are running into these days. And they're hoping to get their coaching partner to do something about it, and that's taking on too much for them. So how do we look more? And I wonder if the councils could get involved in something like that, where the councils have more authority, so to speak, to address a school board and or a principal to kind of start shifting them. But that's the piece that's so hard with the systems. That we don't really think of as a coaching piece, but if you could get in to talk to them about what's appropriate in their system to reach the outcomes they're looking for, starting out with what are the outcomes you want, here's how that starts, maybe at a toddler level, that might be helpful. So now you're not just accommodating, because you're wasting your time. Obviously, I feel that frustration from you, Tina, right? It's like, okay, this person has no control over what they're supposed to do, and they're accommodating. Now you're accommodating, and now think of the generations going by that are inappropriately learning, right? So just know that sometimes it's beyond us, and who can we call on to deal with the system?
Yeah, I like that. And I call that the we have to go through the weeds, because not to call, yeah, not intentionally bad, but yeah, it's kind of like we got to get through all of the Chicos and the brush and the to get to the, to the main thing. And the other thing I was thinking about too in this particular area is that the culture in the area is so strong that there's not a really good sense of like soft parenting or that it's a very old school kind of like spank them and yeah,
Yeah.
spank them.
I
If someone
think
hits you, hit them back. If someone's teasing you, hit them back. If they're that kind of a thing. And so that also kind of attributes to that kind of following along and accommodating, like not only in the school district, but in the community.
yeah,
It's
that
so tightly knit.
this is the way that
This is
it
the
is.
way. Yeah.
And so this is the way we do things. And
Mhm.
so it strikes me as very interesting because I've spent the last couple of days actually reviewing legislation that created our Department of Early Childhood. And in doing that, I was specifically looking at the Early Childhood Council section versus the UPK section. And the fascinating thing about that is sort of the historical creation of councils back in the late 90s that was really very grassroots. Let's figure out how do we better support families and children, et cetera. And then the UPK piece, which I have to suspect has large history with Carl Preschool program, which has probably a lot of influence, say, from federal things like Head Start. And when you read those sections of the legislation, they are so different. They clearly were written by different people. And one of them is very authoritarian. The other one is much more on the permissive, let's figure this out language. And I didn't think I was going to run into that and have such a gut reaction to it in reviewing it recently. But it kind of gives us that sense that, education is so important. It is the perceptions of how it happens that make that then difficult, because is it putting down upon, or is it helping those grow up through? And that's kind of the crossroads. And I think with the funding for universal preschool across the state, the mixed delivery system, we're seeing both concerns and then embracing of something that gives them, it programs a structure to say, hey, I'm doing this. I'm not sure if they're all fully aware of the implications of shifting to staying true to who they are and want to be, and or being influenced by this other side of it. So I'm keeping my eyes on that myself. I was very concerned about UPK in the first place because I personally thought the money should have gone to infants and toddlers, but oh well. I only had one vote. So let's step to the next slide here, Janet. Okay. So as I was preparing for this, I came across a piece that was written by someone who was very clearly educated, very much in the realm of social sciences, young children, and things like that. His name is Naraza Peitman. And so this is a little bit of a story that he wrote, and I'm going to paraphrase parts of it because I don't know that you need every single word. But he starts out by talking about a situation in which he has had a long-term friend, but this friend all of a sudden is not responding to his outreach. And event, and it has known this person for 20 years. So let's see, he says, the person had consistently canceled plans, elaborate excuses. It was kind of getting hard to ignore. So I don't know if any of you have situations in which you're trying to schedule a coaching situation and now all of a sudden it's not following through, kind of a thing. And at one point he's like, I just want to delete this message, I don't want to hear it. But he finally decided he was going to give a different response back. And once they had their conversation about what really was going on, why was this person coming up with all of these elaborate things and everything, it came out because the other individual had always had the outward appearance of being very strong, very capable, very able to take on the world. But that something had happened and that person wasn't feeling that anymore. So they were really able to come back to their friendship piece. And he describes that at the end of the discussion, they weren't just friends anymore. They were something deeper, bound by the kind of honesty that only emerges when you risk losing what matters most. Beyond that, though, this particular document that he brought forward really took a lot of look at quite a bit of research. And he said that in one study that psychologists had tracked people from infancy to adulthood, and they discovered something remarkable, that 72% of us maintain the same basic approach to relationships throughout our lives, that those lucky enough to develop what researchers call secure attachment in childhood possess an almost magical ability to engage in honest conversations without fearing that friendship or relationship would shatter. He said, so think of it this way, that some of us learned that relationships can weather storms, and storms are going to happen. That we can have an invisible sense of safety that whispers, even if this conversation gets messy, we'll figure it out. And I think sometimes, boy, if I didn't know that person very well, but I needed to have this conversation, if I used that little phrase at the beginning of it, what could just those few words mean to getting into that conversation? Even if this conversation gets messy, we'll figure it out. However, others learn that conflict means danger, that speaking up risks abandonment. And so those are the pieces and patterns that we have to be aware of. Let's see. He also talks about the fact that some of us have this ability to be aware of what's going on in our own mind while really understanding what's going on with someone else when we're in the midst of something very challenging, like these hard conversations. So let's see, he says, it sounds simple, but try doing it when your heart is racing because your friend just said something that hurt. Children who develop this skill early show better peer relationships throughout their lives, experiencing less social anxiety and more genuine connection. In doing meta-analyses, examining thousands of relationships, was found, and I think we'd agree that emotional intelligence correlates significantly with better conflict resolution. And he said what surprised him the most in looking at that is it's not about avoiding conflict altogether. The healthiest friendships actively engage with disagreement, using sophisticated emotional skills to navigate rough waters rather than pretending the ocean is always calm. So, you know, it might be that we can use information like this to have conversations that are hard with individuals we're working with to help them understand the importance for this to be something that's available for young children to learn and experience and become stronger at these skills. Another piece within this article is about the individuals, and I don't remember which one of you brought it up before, that you were talking about the challenging conversations, and that when you can make it through that, how much stronger then the relationship can be, because you made it through that together. And if that doesn't build trust in each other to know that it's okay to not necessarily agree, but to have some place where you can come to this together out of it, even if it's just understanding where each person is coming from. He ends with a piece that's called The Long Game. And for me, this is the long game. This is the piece where we are doing hard work because in the end, the outcome from it is going to be so much stronger, so much better for everyone involved, for us as adults, for children in our care, for the adults that we influence who are influencing other children. So it says quality relationships, the kind that weathered difficult conversations, predicted better mental health outcomes later. So, and so there's another comment here of those who prioritized being popular over developing connections were more likely to have increased social anxiety as adults. So the ability to build connections. And I think obviously we are pretty hardwired for that. We need each other. So his end is, you know, embrace that discomfort. So I know some of you thought that we could come in here and maybe have some conversation. We do have some time left, so I don't know if people have thoughts in regards to Tina's comments, or if some of you have a particular something of your own that you are struggling with, that nothing that has been shared today has been helpful yet, or maybe it sparked an idea for you.
Lisa, can we start with, there's a request for repeating the name of the person who wrote this article. And
yeah, and I will actually share it.
Oh, great.
So I'm just going to, how about if I spell it?
Great, go ahead.
With Norazha. The last name is Pai, capital TMAN. And the title of this article that I came across was Tough Conversations Build True Friends. It's a P instead of a T at the beginning of the last name, Janet.
It's a P?
It's a P-A-I. It's a capital P-A-I, capital T-M-A-N.
Better?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Has anybody not had a hard conversation in your life? I feel like if I think about it, how many I've had has been quite a number. I had a job in the past where I was working with an animal shelter, and a stray dog was brought in, and it was a very elderly dog. And if you work in the shelter world, you come across a larger number of animals that are surrendered that are very old. And individuals can't afford, won't afford, whatever it is, the expenses of providing care for them. Maybe they're not able to provide care, but they're surrendered. And so, unfortunately, what happened is the dog was taken into the back of the shelter and placed in a kennel. And this kennel staff person walked through, and they see this dog, and they were immediately angry because another one just who spent their life with a family, and now they're here. And I get to, in her mind is, and I get to put this animal down because it's not going to get adopted. And no, this was quite some time ago. So I think nowadays we have better supports for elderly animals. But, and she took the dog back and she euthanized it. And guess what? That dog had not been surrendered. It was a stray. So as the director of that organization, I had to get our animal control officer to go to the known address of that animal and post a note on the door. And what I had them put on the door was to call me. And I gave them my personal phone number. This also was the day before we had cell phones. And late that evening, I got a phone call. And I had to share with that family what had happened with their pet. And I think it was because of the way that I handled the conversation, that I was upfront, that I didn't make them go searching and wondering what had happened. That in some sense, I think it gave that family relief because they actually had gone on vacation, and that was the day they came back. That somehow or another, the person who was house sitting had let the dog get loose. Other conversations in that world with individuals who were very abusive, and that we were going to end up taking everything they had. But he loved his dogs. Dealing with family members who get very, very emotional. So, and we are emotional beings, and I don't want us to not be.
I think that brings up a lot of conversations I've had with coaching partners, where, or even just staff members, where the walls are so thick, right? Those are some tough relationships to build because they're so hardened. Those traumas, those distrusts, et cetera, over a lifetime can really make such an impact on them that they shut themselves down. And one woman, 5 years I worked with her, and it was just pushback all the way. And then I see her a couple of years later at an event, and she hugs me and says, "I learned so much from you." I'm like, what? You could have told me that, I struggled every night. I'd be like, how do I get through to her, right? And so, you think you're not getting through to someone when, your consistency and your, your caring, your compassion really does go through to them, regardless of whether or not you've been able to break through the 100th wall, is what I really learned from that. So really thinking about how we then go forward with our efforts are not in vain, and to just keep on like you have been, Tina, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, with that one particular teacher. But I was thinking too of another story, and it was similar to what you're talking about, Janet, the consistency and the routine of knowing the expectations, of knowing what the relationship is right up front. And so I'd worked with this young girl that was, it was a very long time. It was probably, gosh, almost my whole entire career here at the council. So I'm going to say at least like 14 years I had been working with her. And so we built a really strong relationship. We had high respect for each other and trust, and we could laugh, and then I came to visit one day, and it was odd. It was odd. And I walked into the classroom and the babies were napping, and I couldn't see the teacher. It was dark. It was very dark. And I finally saw the teacher, but she was sleeping. And yeah, and so that I mean, we were friends. And so I just had to tell her, I have to report this. I have to report what I'm seeing. And luckily, though, she was very understanding. She knew. She started to tell me like why she was asleep and what happened. And I said, I understand, those things happen and we do get tired and we do, but I still have to report this to your director, and I have to just report. And yeah. But to this day, she's no longer she's not in the early childhood profession right now. She's not working in a program, but we still are in communication. So, I mean, yeah, it didn't sever that piece, but it was pretty uncomfortable though. It was pretty uncomfortable to talk to her about that.
Yeah, I do think of situations where individuals then have to file a report of some kind because of something that they have witnessed. And
those are hard conversations in itself. I have had to do that a few times in my life and more than I wanted to, but it's like, I'm straight up with them too. And I tell them I'm going to report. That's my job. I'm a reporter. I'm a mandated reporter, and this is reportable. So it's part of what has to happen.
And yeah. And so Pam picked out a comment that was in the article that I referenced, and she said, preserve the comfortable fiction that everything was fine, because if we don't have these conversations, then we maybe don't report, we don't make suggestions or have the hard conversations to move to another place that are in relation to children that are in care. So I do think about this whole thing of the idea of the education somewhere, how that it got to be this power on top, push down situation, and love being in early childhood, where I would like to say that that's not what I have to deal with. It does sound like it's out there some places, but how can we support individuals and programs and have hard conversations? And as Janet mentioned, maybe it is through issues of advocacy versus just the hard conversation with an individual in a classroom or a program. So, and I think that's where I find myself landing most these days, and that is the advocacy side of things. So I did put a link to the touch points, principles, and assumptions. On one of the slides, I actually used one of the, I don't remember now which one I used. It was a principle or an assumption. But I have to say that the touch points training for me was and has been one of the most powerful trainings I've ever taken in terms of both thinking about how we perceive another person, how we interact with them, as well as really getting deep into the developmental side for young children and supporting the adults thinking about the development in that perspective. So I really appreciate everybody being here today. I thought, oh, well, this is going to be on Thursday. There's been 2 full days worth of trainings. I'm not so sure this is going to be a very big group. And it was going to be okay to do more of a conversational style. And so I'm sorry if some of you are not speaking up and maybe you are more in the side of avoiding or accommodating and soaking things in, and that's fine. But I appreciate those of you who were willing to have some conversation. Thanks, Anola.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. Well,
See you this afternoon.
all right.
And what is it? 2 o'clock, I believe. Let me just check that.
Yes.
Yes, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and it's Tina. Tina's up.
Tina,
Another one of our consortium steering committee members. Thanks, everybody, for joining today and your contributions.
And there's a feedback form, so you can fill that out if you're needing a certificate specific to this session. Otherwise, I think you can click through and select all of the sessions you attended.